After giving birth to a baby with dark skin, her husband abandoned her and their child. However, 4 years later, she made the decision to undergo a DNA test, which left everyone stunned by the results. When Melvin finally walked out of the labor ward to share the happy news, he looked angry and defeated. All of their close family and friends had gathered, waiting to meet the new baby and find out if it was a boy or a girl. Everyone eagerly asked what it was, only for him to reply with one single word: black. Confused, they asked if it was a boy or a girl. He angrily told them it was a boy, but that it wasn't his. Susan had just given birth to a black baby, and considering that neither of them were black, he had immediately accused her of cheating. That was the only explanation. He felt that all of his hopes and dreams had been shattered, and after breaking the news to everyone, he simply left the hospital, leaving his exhausted wife and newborn child to themselves. Susan and Melvin had been striving to conceive for 2 years since their wedding. Despite their efforts to start a family, they faced disappointment. Medical tests showed no issues, leaving them disheartened, feeling as though fate was working against them. However, their luck changed just after their second anniversary when Susan discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them with overwhelming joy, which they eagerly shared with their loved ones. Susan's pregnancy went perfectly well, and soon enough, she was in labor. The parents kept the gender a secret, and everyone was excited to meet the new addition to the family. But when the baby came out with a darker skin shade than expected, all hell broke loose. Susan was just as bewildered and confused by the skin color of her child. She kept telling Melvin that she had always been faithful to him, and that she had no idea how it had happened. But Melvin refused to believe her, as did everyone else, including her very own parents. Melvin left her at the hospital then and there. He told Suzanne that he would be going home to pack a bag and didn't want to ever see her or the baby again. Susan was overwhelmed with grief, feeling unjustly punished for something she hadn't done. Despite the turmoil tainted by anger and distrust, she looked at her son with pure love, accepting him wholeheartedly. The mystery of his dark skin puzzled her. But without support, she focused on caring for her newborn alone. The abandonment by her husband compounded her struggles, leaving her feeling isolated and overwhelmed as she navigated motherhood. She barely even had the time to think about how radically her life had changed with her son's birth. Everything and everyone that she loved was now gone. It was just her and her son, Murphy, against the world. This proved to be much more difficult than it should have been, though. They lived in a predominantly white suburb, so being a white mother with a child of color was extremely noticeable. That, and the fact that it was a small town, didn't help either. Wherever they went, some people looked at them in shock or disgust. Some elderly people even spat at her feet. Susan was always quick to defend herself and little Murphy. She would yell at them and tell them it wasn't the 40s anymore. People of color were just as equal to everyone else. But this reaction just made her become more ostracized where they lived. Poor Murphy was also treated differently at daycare. The parents of the other kids had obviously said horrible things about him and his mother because they would bully and ignore him whenever given the opportunity. Until one day, Murphy came home and his bag had been cut to shreds by his classmates. For Susan, this was the final straw. She decided that it would be best if she and her son moved to a bigger city where diversity was celebrated and accepted. That way, Murphy could grow up without feeling that he was too different. He also didn't need to know the truth about his father until he was much older. Moving away from the area where everyone knew the story, or thought they did anyway, was the best option to allow this to happen. So they moved to New York City. Susan got a small apartment, and the pair began their new life immediately. It was so much better. People on the streets and in the grocery store hardly even paid any attention to them at all. For the first time since little Murphy was born, Susan felt like she could breathe. It was a wonderful feeling, for sure, no one judging her or turning their backs on her. She wondered why she hadn't made the move earlier. Little Murphy grew up much happier in the city, and soon enough, it was time for him to be enrolled in school. He was so excited. Though he was only 4 years old, he felt he was much older. Susan couldn't help but revel in her son's happiness. But with little Murphy growing up, so did the questions begin. He had always asked about his father, which Susan had cleverly and gently evaded. But now that he was in formal schooling, she found it increasingly difficult to avoid the question. One day, Murphy came home with a task that required him to put together a poster telling his class all about his parents. He was so excited. The minute he saw his mother, he began to ask her as many questions as he could think of about her and his father. But when Susan couldn't answer about his dad, he got really upset. He started on about how all the other kids lived with their dads, but he didn't. He wanted to know what was wrong with him, why his life was so different. Susan struggled with her son's turmoil. The whole situation was really difficult to approach. How do you explain to a 5-year-old that his father abandoned him because of his skin color? However, this whole situation got Susan thinking seriously. She knew she wanted to have proof once and for all that Melvin was, in fact, Murphy's father. For the first time since he was born, she finally found the strength to do what she should have done all those years prior: a DNA test. Melvin had left his hairbrush in the bathroom all those years ago, and he had kept it for this very purpose. She knew that one day she would get the DNA test done, and now it was the perfect time to do it. She took some of Melvin's hair from the brush and then a little from Murphy's. She went to a laboratory and got them to process the DNA test. She didn't take Murphy with her at first, as she wanted the results to be run accurately, without bias and tampering. What she found out shocked her and everyone else. As much as she had always known it, it was Melvin's child. It was so wonderful to finally get confirmation that she was right. Without any hesitation, she sent the positive paternity result to Melvin and the rest of the family right away. Melvin responded and wanted the test to be done again, this time with him and Murphy present. Melvin's consistent display of distrust was insulting, but Susan didn't care at that point. She knew what the test would say. So they did just that. And when the results came back positive once again, Melvin had to face for the first time how wrong he had been. Now that he looked at his 5-year-old son, he could see some resemblance with himself at that age. But how come his son's skin was so dark? When they consulted a geneticist, he explained that it could be a kickback gene from generations before. Though Suzanne felt vindicated, she was deeply wounded by Melvin and others' actions. They sought immediate re-entry into little Murphy's life, but Susan insisted they prove their worthiness. Her son meant everything to her, and she believed they hadn't earned the right to be in their lives after mistreating them. Time would reveal their true intentions. This experience underscored the adage that appearances can be deceiving, yet every individual deserves love and care regardless. If your baby were of a different race than you, would you have accepted them? Would you consider welcoming the boy's father back into your child's life? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you.